Hey, it's Troy. I went ahead and I inked up some new acquisitions and wanted to talk about one of them today. One of the things that I enjoy about communist countries is that I can get some stuff that's been left over. A good example is when you deal with countries like Czechoslovakia or the former Soviet Union, some of these communist Eastern Bloc countries, you tend to be able to find some ammunition that has been left over. I got some Czechoslovakian handguns that I really like. Czechs make excellent weapons. One of the things that Czechoslovakia has been known for in the pen community is the Centropen. And I happen to have a fairly new acquisition, the Centropen 242. And you can see there's some writing on that, and there's a little story behind it. This particular pen was made for the 14th Congress of the Bulgarian Communist Party. Their extraordinary Congress that was held in Sofia, Czechoslovakia, between January 30th and February the 2nd of 1990. This particular pen was manufactured in 1989 for that Congress that was up and coming in the beginning of 1990. So this was came to me from Bulgaria, and I got here. See right there, shipped to me from Bulgaria. That's one of the things that you're going to find about these Eastern European countries is you can occasionally find a good deal on fountain pens. The American dollar that I value this pen at probably goes a lot further in Bulgaria than it does here in the United States. In talking to a girl who was on a cruise ship one time from Belarus, she was telling me that even though she's making less money than she would make on mainland USA, she was actually making 5 times what she would be making back in Belarus. So it makes sense. So that's why you can occasionally find a decent deal, and they fulfill your orders when you order from a Bulgarian or a Czech or some of these other nations. And that's where I'm finding a lot of bargains on good used pens. I got a Pelican that way and a few others. So I went ahead and ordered this particular pen. So it's made of a kind of a hard plastic. It is a slip top. It's a dark gray. I guess I would call that a very dark gray rather than a light black. It's got the gold trim that goes along with it. So visually, it's not a bad looking pen. When you feel it, you go, yeah, there's nothing really special about it, but it is a hard plastic that I would expect to see in some of the former Soviet bloc nations. So you open it up, and it's got a semi-hooded nib to it. I guess I would call that semi-hooded. So it does kind of help protect that nib a little bit from drying out. It's got the gold tone right there. You see it's got the gold tone right here as well. The section is the same hard plastic in that dark gray. So you've got that trim here. It snaps tight pretty well. And then you've got the barrel. It's a fairly slender pen, and it's not all that heavy. I mean, this pen, you look at it, and you don't know what to expect when you go to pick it up. I expected it actually to be a little heavier than it was when I first picked it up, but I found, okay, it's a hard plastic, and it was only 11 grams. That's 0.35 ounces. So, you know, it's a lot lighter in the hand than I thought it was going to be. You go ahead and you post it, and it's very comfortable. Because it's so light, personally, I wouldn't write without it being posted. It's not all that long. It can fit in the hand, and you can write with it unposted, but I've tried it with both, posted and unposted, and personally I prefer that it be posted. So, it's actually a nice little writer. It writes a little finer than I thought it would. I wasn't sure because there was no specification as to whether it was a fine or a medium, and it actually writes on the fine side, so I would label that as being a fine nib, but I like how they kept the gold tone with it, at least. So, let's see, what else can I tell you about it? It's, let's see, capped, it's like 5 1/4 inches long, 4 5/8 uncapped and 5.5 inches posted. It's got a decent amount of feedback when you write with it, but it's not scratchy. What you hear when you write with it is a little deceiving, because usually when I get a lot of feedback that I hear when I'm writing with a pen, you'd think that it's scratchy or toothy. Not so much with this pen. It's just because it's a little finer, and it's just it writes very well. It writes reliably. Every time I've picked it up so far and went to go write with it, it's been a solid writer. What else can I tell you about it? Let me tell you about this. The pen, when I first got it, they gave me a good long cartridge that it came with. And because the body's long enough for it to fit in, it was an international standard long. But I didn't want to use a cartridge. So I just chucked the cartridge in a drawer, got out an old, I think this is just an old Jinhao converter that I had laying around, because it does take standard international cartridges. So I went ahead and inked the thing up, and I put in a Birmingham Pens Grandview Avenue Midnight Horizon blue-black ink into it. One of the things that I found, though, is you got to be careful how deeply you put this into the ink, because you may not be able to see it, but I can still see just a tinge of it left. That this particular pen here in the section, if you get some on the section, it will stain the section somewhat. So I had to make sure I blotted that off, and even did cleaned it off like this a little bit, and ended up getting some blue-black or some grayish ink on my fingers, which is mostly gone by now. But it's not as bad as it was, because when I first pulled it out of the ink, I was like, "Dope!" But that's one of the things to look for if you deal with this kind of a Centropen, if you can find them. So, it's a nothing fancy pen, manufactured for communists, by communists, and was sold as never having been used before. So I figured this capitalist will go ahead and snatch it up. Oh, let's see. Other than that, that's really all I got to tell you about it. And I was looking forward to this one because I've never owned a Czech pen. I've heard about Centropen. I know of people who have Centropen, and knowing how Czech surplus has been for me in firearms, I was actually looking forward to a well-built, hopefully reliable fountain pen. I will tell you that so far this has been reliable. So far it has written well every time I've tried it. And it's not uncomfortable in the hand, can write for quite a while with it, and that's about it. I can't say the construction is as high a grade as I was hoping for, since it is kind of just a cheap plastic. So it's the 14th Congress of the Bulgarian Communist Party. I don't know what the rest of it is. Roman numerals I understand, but the Czech language, or whatever language that happens to be, that I don't understand, but I'm assuming that means something for their Congress. So anyway, that's about it, and I'll give you a writing sample since I went ahead and did that. This is the Centropen Czechoslovakian pen, model number 242, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that. You've probably already seen that in a review anyway, but this is the Czech CZECH, for because I can't spell Czechoslovakian, but it is a Centro pen, model number 242. It seems to be a fine nib. It's definitely, it's not a gold nib, but it seems to be a steel nib. Really doesn't have any flex to it. But it writes very steadily, very reliably. And in this particular pen, I put in some Birmingham pens. I put in their Grandview Avenue, Midnight Horizon, I think that's what it is, Midnight Horizon And it seems to be more of a blue-black or a black-blue. Now, in this particular pen, you're not going to get a whole lot of flexibility. You see with that semi-hooded nib, that's one of the things that keeps down is the amount of flex that you can get to it. But even though you seem to get a good amount of feedback when you write, you can probably hear that. This paper in general seems to be a fairly soak-it-up kind of paper. But even though it's a fine nib, it actually writes fairly smoothly, even though you can hear some of the feedback. So, surprisingly, it writes smoother than it looks with that nib. It writes smoother than it sounds, because even though you get the feedback noise to it, it actually does fairly well. So, let me try a little bit of reverse writing. That's not too bad whatsoever. Oh, let's see, some line variations. Let's see what I can do for you. You get more line variation than you'd think you would get. It's got still a little bit of give on this nib. Upwards. So, not too bad at all. Oh, let's see, what else? Oh, how about some fast writing? Let me go up here. So I just want to scribble a signature out. It keeps up with me just fine. So, not too bad altogether. It actually writes better than I thought it would when I saw the semi-hooded nib. And when I tried to write with it at first, okay, it's a little finer than I expected it to be. But all in all, it actually does fairly well.